Iceland's government on shaky ground. You need to stop visiting Reynisfjara. Now you can legally name your kids Jim, and more on this episode of the Reykjavik Newsdesk. First up on the Reykjavik Newsdesk, the ruling coalition, led by the Left Greens with the Independence Party and the Progressive Party, have never been polling lower. At the same time, tensions are growing between these three parties. According to a new poll from Maskina, the Social Democrats are polling highest of all at 27.2%. Meanwhile, the Independence Party, is polling second highest at 18.5%, while normally this would be the party that always leads the polls, well, almost always. Support for this coalition is now at a frankly abysmal 34.2%, and hasn't been lower since their elections in 2021. But to be fair, during the elections of 2021, their support wasn't that great either. They were at 54% at that time. But these abysmal poll numbers are not what is causing the tension between these three parties. As I reported on my previous video, Eastlands Bank has paid a settlement to the Financial Supervisory Authority to the tune of 1.2 billion ISK for their mishandling of how some 22.5% of the bank's shares were sold in March of 2022. The details of the settlement agreement have recently come out, and they've shown a shocking degree of a lack of due diligence on the part of Icelandic Bank, and that includes some bank employees buying shares of Icelandic Bank. And the fact that they paid this settlement has prompted some members of parliament to say that them just making a settlement is tantamount to the bank admitting that they broke the law. But why does this reflect badly on the government? Well, because the bank belongs to the government, and it was the Independence Party in general and Bjarni Benediktsson, the Minister of Finance and the chair of the Independence Party in particular, who really pushed for the privatization of all of the banks, including Icelandic Bank, and they continue to push for this, and they push for selling these shares. Furthermore, we have laws in this country regarding the legal responsibilities of the finance minister, and they include that when the government sells assets to private entities, it's the finance minister who bears responsibility for them. It's the finance minister who oversees these sales and has to give the green light for different details of these sales, including the sales of these shares in Icelandic Bank. In fact, Bjarni himself was more than willing to announce his personal responsibility for this bank sale in November of 2022 when everything looked like it was going great. And not to put too fine a point on it, but as I also reported, one of the buyers for these shares was a company owned by Bjarni's father. So a reasonable person could conclude that Bjarni either knew this was his dad's company and simply let the sale go through anyway, or he wasn't doing his job and he was negligent and he just signed off on everything en masse without really looking into the details. Well, the excuse that Bjarni ended up giving is that he doesn't talk to his dad very often, and he didn't know that his dad was going to be buying shares in Icelandic Bank, and people just accepted this. And to be fair, yeah, that is kind of believable. I mean, I talk to my dad about once a month, and if he told me that he owned a company and it was buying shares in a bank, that would also come as a surprise to me. But on the other hand, I'm not the finance minister of this country, so it's not really my business if my father wants to do stuff like that. But this scandal is even bigger than that. Hanna Katrín Friðriksson, who is the chair of the Reform Party, recently called for Parliament to be reconvened from summer vacation to discuss, who bears political responsibility for this matter. But the Prime Minister Katrín Jakobsdóttir, said that there was absolutely no reason to bring Parliament back together. And that may seem amazing, considering the scale of this scandal. But furthermore, Katrín has herself told the press repeatedly that it is bank management who bears responsibility, and no one else, apparently, for what went wrong in this sale of shares. And she hasn't mentioned a word of the responsibility that the finance minister himself, again, in November 2022, said he bears for this particular bank sale. It may seem strange at first that the Prime Minister and the chair of the Left Green Party would be caping for the finance minister and the chair of the Independence Party, but if you take a closer look at this, it actually makes a lot of sense, and we'll get to that later. Anyway, Katrín and Bjarni and chair of the Progressive Party, Sigurður Ingi Jóhannsson, sat down for the television roundtable discussion show Pallborðið to talk about some things. The bank scandal was brought up, and once again, Katrín placed all of the responsibility on bank management, and Bjarni even went so far as to downplay some of the activities of the bank. The temporary ban on fin whale hunting was also brought up, and Katrín said that she supported the Minister of Fisheries in her decision to issue this ban because fin whale hunting was breaking animal welfare laws. Bjarni, however, said that this was an extremely serious matter and a very grave decision that should have been put before Parliament for a vote, which is pretty rich because we had a justice minister, Jón Gunnarsson, who circumvented Parliament to give the police tasers, and Bjarni wasn't really talking all that much about ministerial overreach when that happened, but Jón Gunnarsson is also from the Independence Party, so, you know. Anyway, Sigurður Ingi essentially agreed with Bjarni on this point. Then the topic of immigration came up, and the aforementioned Jón Gunnarsson had some pretty extreme points of view about immigration, and in fact, he had passed a law, a very strict law, on immigration that NGOs across the country said broke human rights. And when these three political leaders were asked, should the immigration laws go even further? Katrín was like, I don't know. And Bjarni was like, yes, absolutely. And Sigurður Ingi, once again, agreed with Bjarni on this point. So where am I going with this? When Bjarni was directly asked if the temporary ban on fin whale hunting threatened the existence of the coalition government, he didn't say no. He didn't say, well, we'll talk it out. Everyone has disagreements. No, he was really cagey about it. He said that this was a really serious matter and that they, I guess, in the Independence Party, were not happy with this decision. You see, Bjarni is holding all the cards here. Like, yes, the Independence Party is polling at a low level, but low in this case means 18.5%. They're still the second largest party in the country. If elections were held today, the Independence Party would be crucial in the forming of any sort of ruling coalition government, and Bjarni knows this. This is why he can afford to openly slam his coalition partner in the Left Greens. And this is also why Sigurður Ingi pretty much goes along with whatever Bjarni says, because going along with whatever the majority says is pretty much the entire raison d'etre of the Progressive Party. And Katrín knows this as well. The Left Greens are polling at 7%. And it could go even lower. This is a party that betrayed pretty much everything that they ever stood for in order to lead the government. She absolutely needs this coalition to work, so I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for the prime minister to say, in as strong a terms as Bjarni has criticized her, for her to say that Bjarni needs to shoulder responsibility for what happened at Icelands Bank. And again, just as a reminder, Bjarni himself said last November that he bears responsibility for this bank sale, even though now he's singing a much different tune, that it's the banks themselves who have ruined the public trust. In other words, Bjarni can do pretty much anything at this point, and the Progressive Party is just going to go along with whatever he says, and the Left Greens, who very much need this coalition to hold, are not going to push him too hard on anything. So the bottom line is, will this government break up? I still say it's unlikely, but it's less unlikely than it was 2 weeks ago. What the next steps happen in this banking scandal and in the temporary fin whale hunting ban and in immigration and countless other issues in terms of who does what and who says what and how certain people react to it is going to determine everything. It's going to be a very delicate next few weeks for this government to hold together. And happier news, philanthropist and entrepreneur Haraldur Ingi Þorleifsson is expanding his Ramp Up initiative to Europe. Now, as you probably already know, Haraldur has been very active in building accessibility ramps all over Reykjavik and across Iceland. Well, now, this initiative is expanding to Paris and possibly other European cities too. So good on him and good on all of us. Also, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, during his visit here in Iceland, took some time to go downtown Reykjavik and take a selfie on Rainbow Street, as many many other tourists before him have done. After doing so, he uploaded this selfie to Twitter saying, quote, "Took this yesterday before heading home because we couldn't leave Reykjavik without visiting Rainbow Street. To everyone celebrating Pride in Iceland, in Canada, and around the world, happy Pride season." This upset fellow Canadian Jordan Peterson, who accused Trudeau of having gone too far, which are pretty strong words to say about a selfie on Rainbow Street, and said that Trudeau was virtue signaling. As an aside, can I just say how much I love it when somebody accuses somebody else of virtue signaling? I mean, there's a criticism to be made when someone verbally supports human rights, but they don't do anything else to try to help marginalized people. But usually when people accuse somebody of virtue signaling, that's not what they mean. Usually it feels more like, how dare you express your support for liberty and equality and being decent to people, in public even. Anyway, for some reason, Reykjavik Mayor Dagur B. Eggertsson QRT'd Jordan Peterson saying, quote, "Dear Jordan Peterson, I want to inform you that in Reykjavik, our Rainbow Street is not a signal of virtue, but of human rights for all. And I'm glad to assure you that the Rainbow Street is not seasonal, it is permanent. And so are human rights and our respect for them," end quote. And this is absolutely true. The city of Reykjavik did announce that the Rainbow Street will be permanent. As far as respect for human rights, well, fingers crossed. The inevitable has finally happened, as Árni Þór Sigurðsson, Iceland's ambassador to Russia, has left the country. As you may remember, earlier this month, our foreign minister told Russia that they should start scaling back operations, and that included recalling their Russian ambassador, giving the justification that the diplomatic work between the two countries is almost nothing. And yeah, understandably so. In addition to Árni leaving, 5 other employees of the Icelandic embassy in Russia have also had their contracts terminated, and the rental contract for the property will also be expired. So I guess these were the dire consequences that Russia warned us would happen. It is now legal to name your child or yourself Jim in Iceland. In case you didn't know, Iceland has a naming committee, and the way it works is if you want to give yourself or your child a name that's not already in the Icelandic lexicon, you must submit an application to the Icelandic Naming Committee. And they review this name and judge it on the grounds if it's historiosity, is that a word? It's a word now, and whether or not this name can be declined in accordance with Icelandic grammar. Now, the committee is not without its detractors. Former Reykjavik mayor and comedian and writer Jón Gnarr, for example, has a serious bone to pick with the naming committee because his name was not always Jón Gnarr. This is just what he was popularly known as, but the naming committee would not let him change his name to Jón Gnarr in the legal sense. He went to Texas to do that. And ever since then, he has been a very vocal critic of the naming committee, saying that it's basically a useless bureaucratic institution that we don't really need anymore. With that aside, now at long last, prospective parents or even aspirational Icelanders of adult age who want to call themselves Jim may now legally do so. But buried in the story was a much bigger story. And that story is that the name Yggdrasil has also been approved by the naming committee. Now, if you're a fan of Norse mythology, or if you've just played a lot of God of War, you probably know that Yggdrasil is the world tree of Norse mythology. And furthermore, this name, because all Icelandic names are gendered, this name is approved as a gender-neutral name. So not only a big step for fans of Norse mythology, but also a big step for non-binary rights. So yay. Lastly, on the Reykjavik Newsdesk, I've linked to an article in the description that contains a photo gallery of tourists caught in a sandstorm at the black sand beach of Reynisfjara. And so I would like to take this opportunity to ask, nay, demand, nay, beg and plead, please stop visiting Reynisfjara. This beach is the site of a sneaker wave. That is, very large waves that come very unpredictably onto the beach and can pull you into this undertow, and it's the claimed lives of a few people so far. Despite the drownings that have happened there because of these surprise sneaker waves, there are still not enough staff to keep an eye on everybody there because tourist companies keep bringing tourists there by the literal busload, which just exacerbates the danger. Furthermore, there's sandstorms there now, apparently. I didn't even know that, but yeah, there are sandstorms all over South Iceland. So I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. Furthermore, I'll just say it. Reynisfjara is not even a very nice place. Do you like black sand beaches? This whole country is surrounded by black sand beaches. Do you like basalt columns? Go to Svartafoss, which is like less than an hour away and much, much prettier than Reynisfjara. In conclusion, Reynisfjara, it's a dangerous place. It's a crowded place. It's an ugly place. Go somewhere else. Stop going to Reynisfjara. Please do it for me. So that's all I have for you this week on the Reykjavik News Desk. Be sure and like and subscribe. And I'm also happy to announce that my next single topic video will be coming out the week after next. And that single topic, as I said, is going to be the cultural and political divide between urban and rural Icelanders. This is a subject that's very close to my heart. I've really want to dig into this topic, and I'm really glad that my viewers decided on this topic on my viewer poll, which is on my Patreon. And if you want to take part in viewer polls and be able to dictate what single topics I do in my single topic videos, you can visit my Patreon, which is in the description of this video. Which reminds me, I want to thank Corinne Vasquez, Marion Ward, Christopher Hunter, Marion Moores, Kimberly McDaniel, Iceman98, and Octavia Hruns Jonsdottir for being patrons on the $20 level, Ian Kingsley and Laura Johnson for being patrons on the $15 level, and Hafstein Himmenlomig Reginusson, Stephen Ellis, and Vivi Carvajal Schaffner for being patrons on the $10 level. You folks rock. That's all from me at Newsdesk. Be good to each other.